Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on ArtistFirst World Radio. Questions and comments are welcome at dj@artistfirst.com. All past shows are in podcast form. Visit artistfirst.com. Here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And when did we become Artist First World Radio? That sounds so awesome.
It does.
It does. It doesn't. Shouldn't it be Artist First Galactic Radio? I think that'd be even better.
I think it was actually the original name of the station back in '96, Artist First World Radio.
Oh, I think let's go for Galactic. Anyway, I'm losing focus. I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
She's Margaret, and tonight, after our long Memorial Day weekend and after 17 months of spending indoor time with your relatives, we have decided that it is time to post the rules for a happy relationship. And they may or may not involve firearms. But I'm sure they don't involve too many firearms anyway. But the impetus for this show is sort of, every once in a while we have a lot of heavy shows, and we do, heavy show after heavy show, and we have interesting and serious topics, and we like to explore them at depth, and we like to be profound, or as much as we can be, and then once in a while we'd like to throw in just like a cookie. So this one is sort of a cookie, but it's also important because I think a large portion of everybody's daily lives and everybody's lives in general is spent trying to have a happy life, and a lot of that centers around having happy relationships, with your significant others, and even with people around you, but certainly with your significant others, because I think all of us would agree that having a happy relationship, one good relationship with one person whom you can really, you're really simpatico with, really can, really share your life with, is worth, many, or really anything else that you might, any other types of relationships that may be, pleasant, but they aren't the same sort of thing. There isn't that depth of understanding and that depth of shared experience. But it takes a lot of work to get there,
Well, first I'd like to say that in the Western world, you have the freedom to be able to form your own relationship with a significant other. There are still cultures out there that do arranged marriages. And certainly. Your family chooses for you whom you will be marrying. Now, before it used to be, even throughout Europe, it was more of a political thing where one family joins another family, so that the two families would not be in conflict with one another.
Right.
They're making a blood tie, which is an important concept when it comes to family. But here, especially in the modern world, you can choose on your own. You have that freedom, which most people just assume that they've all, isn't this the way it's always been?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's sort of a side topic, but it's an important part of that topic. Is if you're going to have a relationship with somebody, you want it to be a voluntary thing on both sides. You want it to be that both parties in the relationship want this to be, and the converse of that is true as well. When marriages were more, let's say, if not political, at least perhaps more about the family than they were about the individuals, your ability to both get into and get out of a relationship was curtailed. It was curtailed by society. It was curtailed by the relationship, the effect that a broken relationship would have on the relationship between much larger groups, between family groups, or between city states or something of that nature. If you want to go, if you're at that level of politics, so making relationships about individuals is sort of a more modern take on things.
Well, if you look at the Indian culture, and I don't mean American Indian, but Asia Indian, they have a caste system. And you are not supposed to marry outside of your caste originally. That was the way it was. And they considered if there was a relationship forming between two people from different castes, that was considered a certain type of love that was throwing everything to the wind. It was it was not.
You're right, because there's whole cadres of Bollywood movies,
Yes.
basically designed around that, the forbidden love.
It's the forbidden love.
Right.
You're not supposed to become involved with someone outside of your caste.
Right. And even again, to sort of digress, but even now, there are many romantic themes are built upon the sort of disparities, this billionaire romance nonsense, or the other. It's always there's this idea that love conquers all, which is the overarching theme of almost all of those types of stories. That even though these two people, these from different, whatever backgrounds and different, it's the prince marries the
actress.
Well, no, the prince marries the chambermaid or whatever. It's this whole idea of, and of course, one of them discovers that they're a prince all along. It's always like that. But the idea though that a marriage is really about the relationship, and it's about the individuals entering into a relationship of their own volition without external forces necessarily either putting them into or taking them out of, is sort of modern. It's sort of new. It's not that it was never done in the past, because everything old is new again, but it certainly came out of systems which were much more stratified and much more much less about the individual and much more about the society or the group or the tribe or whatever it was. But in today's,
Okay. Well, I mean, the foundation of all that was the fact that women did not have the ability to say no. You were supposed to marry whoever it was. There's what we have here in the modern society is women have amazing rights. It's beautiful. Not saying it's a whole different evolution that has happened.
Right, and again, we kind of go in that direction. The idea, the more modern idea of a relationship of equals with volition on both sides has its underpinnings in these other less volitional systems. Whether it's the fact that in essence in the Victorian age you would have many marriages that were May December. We would consider them now. The man would be much older. The women would be much younger. Some of this was driven by society and culture, but a lot of it was also driven by the fact that the process of childbirth was so incredibly dangerous.
Right.
That oftentimes a family would be, there would be several wives that would either have gone through childbirth and either been, died in childbirth, or had been, have serious health consequences through childbirth, and then you would have generational families in the Victorian age where you would have 2 or 3 wives. You
mean gone through 2 or 3 wives? You're not multiple not.
No, exactly. The widowers, would be serial widowing, in essence.
Yeah, but just to clarify the point, we're not talking about
this isn't a polygamy situation. It's really a serial monogamy interspersed by death.
And it's, yes, mostly because the woman would be dying in childbirth. We didn't have the kinds of scientific advances that we have today that allows babies and mothers to survive.
Yeah, but we bring all this, out of all this morass, and the thing is, many times these relationships would be fine, but there would certainly be many instances where a relationship was not, was more tied to mores, convention, or society than it was to the individuals. But today, in this current age, we at least espouse, or at least we do give the window dressing to a marriage of equals. Whether it's true or not, let's not go too far down that road, because you can always find exceptions to the rule. But the idea of this being one of the most important things in people's lives is true. And then today, there's a whole huge, incredibly, maybe not this exact moment, but billions of dollars industry, which we call the wedding industry, which is kind of built on top of this, on top of this idea that you have to do all of these things in a certain way, a certain forum, a certain number of guests, a certain,
It's just a different cultural norm that you're supposed to have the wedding in this particular fashion. And considering the fact that we've all been in self-quarantine for months, that cannot occur. It can't happen the way you may have planned it. You either have to push it to another date or just adapt in another way. But what I'm saying is that it's just appreciation of the fact that the freedom is there to choose, both for males and females to choose.
Okay, so we're kind of back to, so we can't avoid it. We go off and we find profundity no matter what. But okay. This idea that we posted up on the website, I'm not sure if it's there or not. There's many of these things that you can find on the internet. These kind of rules for a happy relationship, or rules for a happy marriage, and there's some that are tongue in cheek and so on. But I thought that this was something that would be interesting, whether or not you can actually have these ceremonies now. Certainly, relationships are stressed. Anytime that the external stressors will come onto a relationship, anytime that happens, you have to kind of fall back, or rather you have to test the bonds. You have to test the bonds of relationship. And we saw in many cases when we were in the cancer wards, where relationships are stressed, they oftentimes would fall apart. So these rules can be sort of trite, if you will, but they do have some basis. They kind of quantify some of the principles that should be applied in any relationship. And the first one they have here, we'll just kind of go through them and maybe see how we go. Is remember why you have this relationship. They say remember why you fell in love. What that harkens back to is what brought these two individuals, these two, without external factors pushing them together or keeping them together. What was the original tie of the relationship? And between yourself and myself, I would say our original tie of our relationship was our ability to talk to each other. To have a real conversation.
Communication is always foundational for a good relationship. And you meet each other on different levels. And the more levels you meet on, the better it is for the relationship and also for the marriage. That's why having a solid relationship before marriage is always important. You have to work out your vocabulary between each other.
Right. But that was one of the first things that attracted me, besides the fact that you're stone cold gorgeous, was Well, that might have been the second thing. But the first thing that attracted me was that I could talk to you like there are many people you will meet in your life, and they may be attractive or they may have certain physical characteristics, but then they open their mouth, and that all goes away.
Now, I can say that for a woman, yes.
Yes. Like, meh. I mean, what attracts you to a person? There are many, many things. There's certainly a certain physical attraction. There's there's your own, probably unrealized kind of biases. You have a particular physiology that attracts you, whatever it is. But there's a broad set of people that could meet that physiology. But then, so you have that set. Then you have just to put it bluntly, there's opportunity. You don't meet everybody in the world. You meet a certain number of people. So there are places where you meet, potentially meet somebody who would become in a relationship with you, with a workplace, a college, school, whatever. And so, and the interesting thing about when you meet people in a common area is that you already have at least something to begin a conversation with. You have a shared interest. You're both in the same place at the same time talking about something. Whatever it is, something brings you together. But the very beginning of a relationship has to have a bit of a spark, and I would say that there's an energy interchange, whatever it turns out to be. And for you and I, it was the fact that we could talk to each other. We had a group of mutual friends, and we're all of an age and all of kind of in the same school, so we had sort of similar interests, if you will. And the genesis of a relationship, though, was, where do you find, and it's something we've talked about before in other contexts, sort of a resonance, sort of you start a conversation with a person whom you already want to have a conversation with. You're attracted to this person or whatever. But then, it can go right off the rails really quick, like, oh man. So you clip the heads off chickens every weekend. Well, that's amazing. And you just kind of back away slowly and don't make eye contact. But I mean, but the first sort of tentative interchanges will find resonance, and if it has to kind of be resonance on both sides. If you find this idea of an attraction is not just a one-way thing. It can be, but that doesn't last. I think that it has to be something which you find not only just an interchange, but also a growth. There's like it's like when you start to talk, and all of a sudden the other person has an interesting point of view, which you may have noticed over the years that Margaret has very interesting points of view about almost everything. And that's an amazingly attractive thing, to find somebody who not only will understand what you're talking about, but also give insight or give something different. Have an additional energy added into the interchange that's unique and that's from their point of view, but yet it sees what you're talking about and it modifies it, and you say, oh yeah, that's the beginning of that's the beginning of a relationship for us, for me anyway.
Well, it's the idea or the concept of being able to communicate so that the idea, the event, the emotion is actually three-dimensional. And so you can talk to each other from different vantage points, looking at if it's a problem. Let's say it's some problem that you want to turn over. Mm-hmm. And to be able to communicate so clearly that it becomes three-dimensional, and you can flip it about to say, well, if you look at it from this perspective, this is what I see, or this is what this person is feeling, or you're switching vantage points. So this person is seeing it from this, but you're seeing it from here.
I think there's another aspect to that. If you find somebody with whom, when you speak with them, they kind of can reveal aspects of yourself, and you reveal aspects of them that they perhaps didn't even appreciate, or it's like you see yourself in another's eyes, but not in just a reflection way, but as you said, in sort of a three-dimensional way, in a in a way which adds insight to both the person you're speaking to, because you're saying, well, wow, where did they come up with that idea? And then also, it's sort of, is that what I'm projecting, or is that what is kind of also informs me?
Is this how I appear to this other person?
Exactly.
I think one of the other interesting things that happens when you find someone with whom you can have a relationship. Most of the time, I think we said this before in previous talks, that people are looking for a reflection of something of themselves, in the other person. So they're hoping to find, when they look at the other person, some aspect of themselves. But in a real relationship, when the bond is there and true, you actually are both looking at the same thing, just different directions. In other words, you're not looking directly at each other as a mirror. You're both on one side looking at whatever it may be and trying to understand it from different vantage points.
I would say that the relationship itself, and we said this before too, is that the relationship itself is 1 + 1 = infinity. It's much larger than the two. Reflective relationships are 1 + 1 = 1, which is not a relationship anymore. It's
an identity.
What do you? That enough of me talking about me. What do you think about me? That's
identity.
That's identity relationships, and a true relationship is 1 + 1 observes infinity. It becomes something which the two together create and experience, but it is greater than either one or both together.
Actually, I got this image. You know how our brains are set up so that we have a bifocal focus.
Yes, focus.
Focus. In other words, if it was a single eye, you'd sort of get, you can't get a perception of depth. If it's just a single eye. So when both eyes are open, that's when the depth can begin to come in. In a relationship, you each represent an eye.
An eye, yes.
So the two of you together begin to form an understanding of whether it's an event in your life or a happening or a problem or a person. You're looking at them as a unit. Each one of you being an eye to the marriage.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, that interchange, how the wiring goes in a human's head with the eyes to the brain, you're already wired to be able to integrate information that way, singularly. So to do it in a married sense actually brings forward more of a really in-depth hologram. Which is amazing if you think about it, because anything that you produce together and you create this holographic form, and this is talking in terms of creating something as opposed to just observing and analyzing or taking things and turning them around, actually coming together and creating something, creating another. It creates a holographic patterning or image. It's like children.
Well, I think as you're wont to do, you've thrown in four or five, seven incredible concepts here. I mean, the eye and the eye become a global mind. The interchange of the information between the two eyes is as close as the two eyes within your brain, and you get a different perspective because each eye together, once you integrate and communicate, develops we call it holographic, but it's certainly a multidimensional representation of the universe, or the part of the universe that's around these eyes, these two in the relationship, and then everything which impacts the eyes gets processed by both, and the information gets shared, and you get a greater understanding, far greater than just if you had all the information and I had all the information, just to put the two of us in there, we would understand it from my point of view, you would understand it from your point of view. But when you have two I and I, the two eyes together understand it from yet a third greater super point of view, which is neither one nor the sum. It is a multiplication, or maybe even a factor of perception. And so that's just like a mind-blowing concept. And she just lays them out there, and you say, you wonder why I love this woman. I love this woman because she just comes up with this stuff. And so but the whole idea of I and I becoming something greater than two I, this is I to the two, it's or I to the to some power, it does become holographic. It's very interesting because when you make a hologram, you do exactly that. You project a two-dimensional image, or a two-dimensional, a three-dimensional representation onto a two-dimensional surface, the surface of the film or the sphere, which is all around that three-dimensional image, and yet it encodes every piece of information in the three dimensions upon a dimensionless two-dimensional film or two-dimensional surface. That's a little deep, but in fact, the two in a relationship, that's why, if you could relate it back down to when you have a true relationship, the resiliency of a relationship goes beyond the bonds of death. It goes beyond it is able to deal with things that no one person could deal with on their own. It is a superhuman state. It is an enlightened or an exalted state to have a true relationship, because you have so much more than just 1 + 1, and it becomes something which you can really you can more completely understand the universe through the I relationship with communication than you can ever do with just the I on your own. The singular I.
Right. And what comes to mind is that phrase in the Bible where God says, "It is not good for man to be alone."
Yeah, it's terrible.
But I wonder if that's what he was speaking of. We were actually created so that we could have this perspective in relationship, and it expands us into something greater than what this physical form is.
That's it's one. Again, we're gonna have to. Well, you know what? Let's take a little break with all this profundity, and we haven't got to we only get to phrase number 1, but we'll come back. We'll go to the studio. We'll have a little break, and we'll come back, and we'll just continue.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time. The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, the Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on Artist First Radio. Back to your hosts, Margaret and Michael Lyons.
Thank you, Scott. Yes. Welcome.
She's the profound one.
Oh, stop.
It's true.
We're having a conversation. This is what our conversations are like, and
This is true. This is what our conversations are like. Now you know, after 3 years, we've let the cat out of the bag. We talk like this all the time.
Yes, and you have very, very insightful and profound things that go on in our conversation.
Yeah, I just sit here and while they come in. But let's go back to our topic, which was we were talking about. Interestingly enough, the rules for a happy marriage are really a happy relationship. But the one that we kind of espoused was, remember why you started the relationship, and we got to a point where we understood that a relationship, being an I and an I, like both the word I meaning a unitary body, as well as an I which perceives, is more than the sum of the two I's. It's quite a lot more. And the next point in these somewhat banal rules is be in the moment, and that's important too. We talked a lot about Tolle and about the power of now, and just the fact that being is not living in the past or worrying about the future. It's being in the now. And for a relationship, it's incredibly important that the two I's in the relationship remain in the now. If you want to see a relationship which is fracturing, you'll see a relationship where one or the other of the I's is in a different time point, all the time. So one is worrying about the future all the time. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen tomorrow? Or one is worrying about, or rather brooding about the past, or regretful. Yeah. And if you want to see a relationship move, if a relationship is not in the now, which means truly perceiving the other, as well as the world around the relationship, as beings, as two beings that become one greater than the sum of one and one, In the now, that relationship is active, it's living, it's being. If you have a relationship where one or the other or both are not living in the now, it's a relationship where, well, first of all, communication is instantly cut off. If one is in regret in the past and the other is in the now, there's no communication there. Similarly, if one is always in the future, what will happen, what will happen, what will happen, there's no communication there. The only place anything can happen, but certainly the only place where any relationship can happen, is to be in the moment. And trivially, it means to enjoy who you're with now, right now. Enjoy the moment, whatever it is, because none of us get them back. There are no do-overs, and no relationship, or all relationships, and every aspect of life, but all relationships change. Every moment of a relationship is a moment in which there is change, and you have to appreciate where you are, not worry about where you were and where you're going to be, because none of that is in the current present moment. And I'm sure Tolly would agree that the individual's perception of now is equally as important as a relationship's perception of now. The entity, which is the relationship, has to live in the now.
It can only live in the now. That's when you, going back, if I could, the analogy of each member in the relationship is an I.
Mm.
So each person is an eyeball in a wholeness of the marriage being. The two of you come together and you form a marriage being.
Right.
So being in the moment means that the both of you are looking at something together, not traveling along and just, you're alone with your thoughts.
Mm.
You're actually communicating one to the other, just like your left and your right side are communicating in your head.
Right.
It's got to coordinate, and allowing that to grow, maybe that's the best way to put it, because it takes practice to be able to coordinate what one person sees and what another person sees, and come together to see the fuller image or the fuller extent of what is happening.
Mm.
It takes a lot of practice, and you can only do that in the moment, in the now. You can't do it in the past, and you certainly can't project that you're going to be doing this in the future.
Well, and if we could digress or stay there for a moment, the importance of regular, constant communication at all levels is what informs that, because your two eyes in your brain, or in your body rather, that are connected through your brain, are sending information really constantly, and it's
Right.
constantly being processed. But in a relationship, that connection is on an energy plane. It's on a it's on a plane where you have to communicate in words, in actions, in energy, in many, many different levels. But it is also voluntary. Your vision is somewhat involuntary. It's probably mostly involuntary. You're not sitting there saying, "Now, brain, process that image. Now, do the next one. Now, do the next one. Breathe in between. Breathe. Or we're going to die." You don't have to say any of those things to your brain. It just happens. Well, relationships, you have to work at a little bit more than that. And the constant practice of interchange both does two things. It both strengthens the relationship, but it also, through this constant sort of practice, it becomes a trust and familiarity and an understanding, so that once you get past, where the harder parts of the relationship are in the beginning, is as you get more used to sharing this information seamlessly and constantly, it now becomes something which you can be informed by how the other person just looks, how their attitude, how their energy feels, the way what they're looking at, what the tone of their voice, all these forms of communication become significant, important, and sort of become a gestalt, if you will use the German term of a multi-channel information exchange. As long as you're completely open, they're completely open. You know when things are impinging on the greater relationship, because you can see it in the other and you can feel it in yourself, and it goes back and forth. It's something which is very obviously perceptible, but people kind of mistrust it. You have to trust that the feeling you have of a event which affects the relationship, which may not affect you directly, it's not poking you in the chest, but you feel it in your gut, or you feel it in the relationship, is an important sensory experience that the relationship has, because the eyes, through the constant communication, have developed a kind of an external sensing that is far beyond your own individual ability to sense things. So that constant interchange goes from I to far greater, and the being, the relationship, which is its own entity and being, grows its own external senses. They're subtle, and they're vast, and they have the ability to sense things which neither can actually physically perceive, but yet it can be perceived by the relationship. And you become a much greater being through the relationship, but it takes work. It takes, you have to keep the communication up on all levels and constantly be practicing it. Staying in the moment and communicating with this person on all different levels. And you will find that the most subtle and delicate of perceptions becomes yours, or theirs, ours. Far beyond what you could have done on your own. You become a greater being. With
yes, it's called evolution.
Yeah,
it's a spiritual evolution.
A spiritual expansion too.
Right, your consciousness expands. Concepts of what you thought were real, and suddenly you realize you only had a portion or a piece of what it actually is.
Yeah.
And just that alone is a huge step, realizing that you really don't know it all. Yes. And there's so much out there to open up to and embrace in your life that that concept alone, to be able to take that in and take hold of that and begin to really live in the moment. Oh my gosh. It's so beautiful. And
interesting. Okay,
it's so real. I mean, that's real.
Interestingly enough, they put that in very big block capitals, and that was important. Now, as we go through these, after this, there's a number of things which are, could be kind of sloughed off. It's to keep your promises, show gratitude, encourage each other, be kind and generous. And you say, oh, well, that's all Hallmark card stuff. And it is, but the important part of all those things, well, first of all, keep your promises is very important, because relationships are all about commitment, and commitment is all about saying what you'll do and doing it, and then expecting that if you trust someone to do something, they will also do it. That's a foundational aspect of a relationship, and you can break them very easily if you don't do that. So that's, I think, more important. But some of the other things in the beginnings of relationships, they're like seeds. They require smaller things, water and sunshine, and the idea of encouraging and being kind and generous are the things that nurture the beginnings of a relationship, and they also maintain the communication lines. All these things, the opposite of them are to cut off communications, being unkind, being stingy, not being grateful. These are all things that break communication lines, and as each communication line that's broken lessens the overall being, which is the relationship. Once you it's like losing a piece of your vision. You can no longer see so clearly. If you're unkind or stingy, it creates a negative energy which blocks the communication. Once you block communication, the being starts to diminish. So these are hallmark card things, other than the promises, which is incredibly important. But all of them are important to keep communication going. The little things in any relationship are little, but yet they become blockages, like a chakra blocked, and then if a blockage stays too long, it gets bigger, and it starts to block other things, and eventually, or sometimes very quickly, you lose whole sections of a relationship through small blockages. So these are important to keep, to both grow and to keep the communications going. So you have the eyes talking to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Assume the best.
Assume the position. Assume the best. Well, that's another one I think for communications, because if you, and maybe this is along the lines of repairing, or at least maintaining relationships, and when you trust somebody, you almost instinctively, or even without thinking about it, assume the best. You say, well, whatever, even if something looks like it was, why didn't they do X, Y, or Z? You say, well, they must have just forgot, or maybe they were tired, or you always, you are ready with the assumption that nothing was ever done with intent to harm, because we're human beings. We are not perfect. We are far from it, and so you will fall down, you will fail, you will do things which aren't, which need to be forgiven or need to be excused. But you always assume that whatever was done with good intentions, and then random events happen, or something causes it to not be as good as it could have been. But you say, well, so part of this is also, I believe it may not be here, but forgiving, assuming the best is forgiving the worst, or forgiving small things. Because again, if you don't, it builds up a negative charge, it blocks communication, the eyes get separated, and you lose the greater being. And the laugh together, which is the next thing, is again that communication, but it's also repairing things. What laughter is a wonderful way to dispel negativity. One of the things you'll find in any relationship, and we found over many years, is that the absurdity of life will crop up on a regular, if not every moment basis.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to learn to laugh about it, and to find somebody with whom you can share the absurdities of life and laugh about it together. It is a wondrous thing, and as a relation, as the two eyes get more and more into be an entity, the shared experiences become a story which no one else knows, and the inside jokes get even more and more inside. So, we can look at each other after many years of relationship and go, yeah, yeah. We don't have to say anything. We know that we're laughing inside about something that only the two of us understand, and that's good, because that entity, which is I and greater, has its own life and its own experiences and its own ways of sharing those experiences through humor, or through just sometimes the subtlest little thing, just the tone of the voice. You go, okay, just not very much. It doesn't take much. Once you've gotten the communication, the channels established, it's like your eyes work so well together, they're seamless. Well, the two eyes in a relationship are seamless, and the subtlest thing gets communicated immediately to the other eye, and then you go, we know where we are. So these are important things. Complement each other, again, the same sort of thing. Keep the relationship at a level where, and this is also sort of in the beginning, I would say that you appreciate and you were unafraid to express your appreciation for the other's commitment to the relationship, whatever they're doing, sometimes the lack of a compliment can become a block. You have to say, well, even though 100 times, some chore gets done, you'll say to me, "Oh, that was really nice. That you did that." And I'm like, "Well, thank you." But it's important. Even those little itty bitty things of thanking someone for doing something they've done 100 times, whether it's making coffee or taking out the trash or doing the dishes or any of the other garbage stuff that everyone does every day, is still reinforcing communications. It's small, it's subtle, but it's the moving it back and forth, because the other things, the subtler, unsaid carriers on top of those larger things, are always kind of flowing back and forth. It's not just that you say, "Hey, that was nice of you." It's all the overtones and undertones of that which are important to keep flowing.
Oh, it's true. Appreciation is the baseline of it. You constantly, you just hold that internal feel in your heart, and you're just, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
I am so glad you're here. I refer back to when you first meet a small child and you walk in the room and they see you and you see them, and all you do is smile at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they're so happy to see you.
Right.
It's so genuine and so sweet and so real.
And no words.
You don't need words, but it's holding that. You're just, I'm so glad to see you. You're here.
Hey, you. Oh, you're here.
I'm here. You're here.
It's so
Yay. Cool. Yeah, and I love that in little ones. It's just so genuine.
It is, and that relationship, sort of parent to child or grandparent to grandchild, is a different one, but it's also very important. The relationships that we're talking about are perhaps the penultimate ones, but even those, the bonds of family and bonds of familial bonds have these same, can be informed in these same ways. In relationships, this is be the first to say I'm sorry, because again, we're talking about communication, and it really goes with assume the best. Whenever something, and there will be things that you are not a perfect person, I'm not a perfect person, certainly, and if you offend somebody, first of all, there's two parts to that. The first part in any relationship is keep the lines of communication open. If you feel offended about something, say it. A lot of relationships build up blocks and toxicity because there's this kind of, I'm mad, but I'm not going to say anything, because me taking poison is going to make you feel worse, So this idea of holding anger within is very toxic. But then when you express anger, or you express disappointment, or you express offense, rather than try to figure out who's right, who's wrong, and go into this kind of extended discourse about, well, you said and they said, no, the simplest way in many cases is just to say, yeah, well, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. And you may or may not have been right. They may or may not have been right, but it oftentimes does not matter. It's much worse to build resentment or negative charges and cut off the eyes than it is to just say, I'm sorry. And the genuineness is say, well, you're not really sorry, but yes, I am, because I'm sorry that even if I was right, that you were offended in some way, that there was any kind of break in our simpatico communication. The sorry is not, I was wrong. The sorry is, I want us to always be communicating. I want us to always be together. And in the assume the best, be the first to say I'm sorry kind of back and forth, it doesn't really matter who's right and who's wrong because it's one entity. You can't tell your toe that, man, you've offended me today. You walked right into that dog poop, and man, I'm mad at you. And the toe's like, duh, you were the one with the leg. so rather than have this argument with yourself, because that's what it is, you forgive yourself. One of your eyes can't tell the other eye that somehow it didn't see right. Both eyes are necessary to see, you know?
Yeah, that's funny, but when you think of it, we know relationships that do that.
That do that. But the being the first to say you're sorry and to assume the best is to say, well, both eyes are trying to do what's right for the greater being. Your toe didn't want to step in the dog poop because now it's covered in dog poop. The point is that as once you become this greater being, the greater being wants nothing but good for itself.
Right.
And it doesn't want to war within itself. When oftentimes comes from many different sources, but a marriage is supposed to be that the two come together and become one, a new thing, a new creation, and that new creation in and of itself has its own life, it has two entities but one life. It's one thing, and so it's never meant to be internally warring against itself. It's a thing that's divided against itself will always fall. A relationship divided against itself, one eye warring against the other, will get pretty dizzy. We're getting so anyway. And then last one I think here is it may be the last one, but trust and communicate, which we've been talking about quite a bit. And oh gosh, I hit the wrong button.
Well, it says listen, forgive, kiss, hold hands. But listening, I'd say, and forgiving, get that down is really, really important. That's
and the kissing part is very important.
Right. Quite all foundational.
The holding hands and rubbing up on each other. Well, and saying I love you, and I love you,
and I love you,
and I'm Michael Lyons,
and I'm Margaret,
and this is the Soul of Everyman.
And thank you for listening.